Good evening, friends from Beach Church. I'm going to have the unbelievable privilege and honor of discussing Romans 7 through 9 with you tonight. Of course, I'm Zeb, and you are who you are, and that needs no further explanation. But I just, Romans 8 is one of the most beloved chapters in the whole Bible. As a matter of fact, a friend of mine who considers himself Christian, but his lifestyle doesn't necessarily reflect it, and I'm just saying there are certain glaring things. But he wanted to impress me, so he told me that he had been reading Romans 8. Also, I believe the whole thing about the Romans road, the Roman road that comes from chapter 8 of Romans. And also, it is basically, there's just so much stuff in there. Paul is so amazing. But there's so much stuff in there that it's kind of the primer, and also to some degree the whole meal on sin from a perspective of a apostle who is not Jesus, obviously. But there's, of course, the thing where Paul talks about how he doesn't do what he wants to do, and he does what he doesn't want to do, and all of that. There's just so much stuff in there. I couldn't possibly cover it in 10 minutes or even 20, or I might start doing justice in 20 hours, but, So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dissect one little thing, one little sentence from Romans 8. And I think that might be of better value to you. So we'll get right into it. So today we will look at, and if you will, dissect Romans 8, verse 28. So we may fully understand what it is that Apostle Paul is saying when he wrote for all future generations. And here it is. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Oh my Lord. There's so much to unwrap there. So let's start with the word know, and we know. Okay, so the word know implies certainty and assurance, not hope, not guesswork. When you know something, you've taken out the maybes. You want to know what stress is? Okay, I'm going to tell you something that maybe you've never known before. Maybe you have. Stress is always something where the maybes are not extracted. If there's a situation and you know which way that you're going, then you go that way. If you don't know which way you're going, then you're going to have to review it, and you're going to go through some maybes, and then you can decide which way you're going. You have to study it and decide which is the best way for you to go. And once you've made that decision, there's no stress. There might be concern. There might be, how do I accomplish this going forward on that road? But there isn't all of this stuff going on in your head. I don't know, because if I do this, then that's stress. That is stress. So Here, Paul says, and we know this. Okay, now let's talk about love, because it says, and we know that for those who love God, okay, let's talk about love, with or without Bonnie Raitt. It's not just an emotion. Actually, I posit that it's no emotion at all. It's not an emotion. It is a character and quality of life that brings things together. You know, like affinity is tolerance of space or not tolerance of space. So love is basically affinity, and it's bringing things together, which is also what an artist does, but that's besides the point. And spurs us on to experience emotions of different qualities and intensities. So it is something that brings us together and spurs us on to experience an adventure. And in that adventure, there's emotions of different qualities and intensities. It's devotion. Loving God means submitting to his will, even when we don't understand his ways, which is quite often. How can we, although, you know, some of us, maybe you, get to be experiencing interacting with God over a period of time, and you get to understand his ways a little bit better. You don't understand his mind, because how could we possibly? But you kind of have some basis to get to see a pattern of how he guides you, and it's different for every person. So how can we, in our lowly and wretched state and in this fallen world, ever hope to fully understand God? Even Jesus in Gethsemane prayed his will to the Father, take this cup, but then closed it with, nevertheless, thy will be done. We can hope to move closer to God every day in every way, and we can wrestle with God and with his word as contained in those 66 books and some Apocrypha. But all Apocrypha are not created equal. But can we ever understand God? Not until we go home. And who knows? I mean, we won't even fully understand God when we're in heaven, because we won't be God. We'll just be in heaven, and that's good enough for me. What does all things mean? Because it says, and we know that for those who love God, who surrender all to God, all things work together for good. So what's all things? All things are each and every, nothing left out, everything without exception, the good, the bad, the ugly, the apparently random, the painful, the confusing, and even the unfair. How often do you experience something or see someone else experience something and feel it cannot be part of God's plan or his doing? Right? No way. God would not do that. Are you so sure? Because here Paul says all things. Okay? All things work together. Work together as God is actively weaving every situation, everything, into a perfect plan. The good, the bad, the ugly, the righteous, the unholy all work together. It's kind of hard to imagine that, but that's, again, it's above our pay grade. This good isn't always about comfort, wealth, or success. So you and I have an idea about good, but it says, and we know that for all those who love God, all things work together for good. So what is good? It refers to, well, it's not always comfort, wealth, or success. It refers to spiritual good, God's purpose for you is not random, but intentional and eternal. What do we call good? Is one person's good another person's also? What's good for the duck hunter is not good for the duck? Not good. We can say an ice cream cone is good. Perhaps you would agree. And probably we should all agree that an ice cream cone is good. For me, it would be quite hazardous. With my diabetes and my lactose intolerance, it's not a good idea. And then we say, well, diabetes is not good. But when I was first diagnosed in 2010, I decided to regard it as a friend who was here with me to teach me better life practices and dietary choices. It was capable of bringing a lot of good into my life, maybe saving me from some even worse disease. Maybe. Hardly a clear-cut thing. This which we call good and not good is not clear-cut. But we can say this: that which is good helps those things that Jesus instructs us to say in what we call the Lord's Prayer. Thy kingdom come, thine will be done. Okay, that's not. Anyway, that wasn't good. The events of your life aren't random. Okay, the good and the bad are woven into God's eternal design. Called. What does that mean? Many are called, few are chosen. We know that for those who love God, all things work together for good for those who are called. Well, that's us, if we're following God's will instead of our own. It's others too, but they haven't answered the call yet. Or maybe they did, and then they backslid. According to his purpose, God's purpose existed before you did, before I did, before Pastor Jimmy did, before Abraham did. He already had your life, but not before Jesus did. He already had your life, calling, and destiny planned. That's a very big subject, and I'm not trying to get into Calvinism, but if Revelation is telling us what's going to happen at the end, then somehow it's not that these things are set in stone completely, but pretty much so. But we have as much hope of understanding that as we do of fully understanding the mind of God itself. What about someone who goes astray of God's plan, as many do, backsliders and others? Well, we can at least understand that God factored that in when he gave us free will. And so, perhaps when you read this again next time, you'll have a more foundational understanding. If so, then I'm blessed in having blessed you. We know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. I hope that helped you now understand what Paul means by that. And maybe you could watch it a couple more times. And maybe I'm just completely off my rocker and off point, and I'm not saying anything of value. I hope that's not the case, but I hope maybe you did get some benefit for that. And